I didn't know I was being cryptic.
I was going to say, they're not special.
National... You like my cryptic tweets?
I do. I live for them.
I didn't know I was being cryptic.
I was going to say, they're not special.
National Affairs editor for New York Magazine and MSNBC political analyst John Helm is back. And former Treasury official and Morning Joe economic analyst Steve Ratner, and in Washington, editorial director of the National Journal Group, Ron Fournier.
Credit at all given to the president for obviously handling it the correct way and not following his European counterparts. No credit to President Obama whatsoever. These practices need to have, they just tripping.
I've never been to Park Slope.
Okay, so we go to Brooklyn.
I think there's
the hippest place. Where do
there's a Quiznos there.
Williamsburg. We go to Williamsburg. And
I get so hip that I can't say the name of it on TV.
You can't.
Because we don't want to be overrun by. We don't want to be overrun by suburbanites.
So we don't want that to happen. We don't want people like me to go to these places, but we do. So we go last night, right?
Yeah.
What's wrong with my sweater?
I'm sorry. It's just...
Well, I make him take the sweater off first before I take him to the dip spot in Williamsburg.
To Connecticut.
What did you
eat? A little too Connecticut. So we go in, and so last night we're in there, and usually, we're watching wrestling or something like that, but...
Dutch wrestling.
Yeah. Right.
Midget wrestling.
And
let's just bring it in for a landing.
I am. So anyway, so John says to me... Wait.
Yeah, I got
it. The Channel is doing the whole thing on the Bible.
Right.
And on Jesus, so he asks the bartender switch the channels. So we're sitting there drinking, doing shots, and we're watching the History Channel's Jesus. And we get about 3 minutes in, and look, and they got Barack Obama on there, right? Except it's not Barack Obama. Like this History Channel thing.
What is
he's also not playing Jesus.
They got there's Satan is to the left, and BuzzFeed reported last night that Satan looks a little bit too much like Barack Obama.
Oh, that's the complaint, I hope.
That's the complaint.
All right. Well, that's an incredible story.
Classic news lead.
It is a
Did I actually do a real story?
Could you believe that? So I'm watching Way Too Early with Thomas Roberts.
Yep.
And he said that, I guess HBO did something with George Bush's head on the spike. They Game of Thrones. I mean, this History Channel thing.
I think people have a lot too much time on their hands. Could we start with the markets? Are you kidding me?
There's George Bush.
What is going on here?
Looks like
Do you all, Alex, put that down.
They had to apologize for that.
Do you guys want people to watch this show? I mean, seriously.
But this Jesus
Stupid
thing. I mean,
that's not Jesus.
Satan, making him look like Satan. That's problematic.
In that place, in the bar we were at, that made them like Obama more.
I know.
People were into that. They were like, yeah, cool.
I know.
I'm gonna
they
move
read
on.
Paradise Lost. They were the only ones in high school cheering for the devil.
Why don't you
I'm going to try and move on and save you all from yourselves. We begin with the markets, where there are big repercussions this morning to a controversial plan by European leaders to partially fund a bailout of Cyprus. Today, Cyprus's parliament will hold an emergency vote to approve the terms of a rescue package that targets individual savings accounts. In exchange for billions of dollars in emergency cash, creditors would impose a one-time tax of 3% on all bank deposits under $130,000.
A little deep here.
No, it's actually a big story.
I know.
The tax would be closer to 10% on people who have over $640,000 in the bank. That's according to the Wall Street Journal this morning. People stood in long lines over the weekend to withdraw money before the policy went into effect. And now Russian President Vladimir Putin is calling the move, quote, unfair, unprofessional, and dangerous. Russian citizens make up the majority of billions of euros held in Cyprus banks.
Steve
this
Ratner,
is important.
Why does this matter? Because we see it. I mean, Cyprus. Cyprus.
Who cares about Cyprus?
Actually, we should.
Cypress Hill gang.
No,
come on, Cyprus. Why does this matter? Come on.
It matters.
You're telling me if somebody sneezes in Cyprus, we get a cold and then on the NASDAQ?
Tell us.
We're going to have a cold on the NASDAQ because the NASDAQ's going to go down today. Look, there's two reasons why this matters. Obviously, not many people care about Cyprus. But first, this is an example of how the Europeans have screwed up a bailout by trying to get the depositors to pay part of the cost. And so you now have a run on the bank. You could have a run on the banks in Europe as the Europeans say to themselves, well, why do I have my money in this bank? There might be a tax on me next. So it's a classic example of how not to do a bailout. It shows that Europe is still a mess, that they have a whole bunch of problems. Cyprus may be really tiny, but it can affect behavior in other parts of the Eurozone, as we saw with Greece. And so it's a case where the Europeans are trying to punish a bunch of Russian oligarchs who have deposits in these Cyprus banks, and it backfired on them.
So what is it? So
no credit to the president, President Obama.
Well, because
how well he handled the recession in our country.
It shows that the Europeans do not know what they are doing. That they do not have.
They don't really know what they're doing.
Well, okay, but when people
that means Obama must know what he's
markets
doing.
Go down and people get scared.
You see, Osborne's in trouble now. Still in trouble. It looks like some of his own conservatives are telling him to back off a little bit on the austerity.
Well, I was actually in London last week for a few days.
Of course you were.
Of course I was.
Yes.
Well, Mika goes to the south of France. I should be able to go to London.
Of course she does.
Right.
We just stay here and we toil in the fields. But go ahead. What did you learn while you were in London?
Are you going to make fun of me?
Making fun of you at all.
What I learned in London is that Osborne is in a tough position. The UK is not growing. It may even go into a triple or quadruple dip recession. The austerity program that he's put in place, which again is something for us to look at as a lesson for how you do or don't run economic policy, has caused the economy to be really slow.
A lot of tax increases over there in Europe. We look at this austerity bit. Really quick, I just want to talk about this just for a second.
Okay, then I want to get
just to clarify some things, and then I want to talk about what's happening in Washington. But economics discussed on TV or on the internet or on Twitter, it's so depressing because people really don't know what they're talking about. They just sort of boil it down. And there's been this belief through the years that tax cuts are not a tool used by Keynesians. Of course tax cuts are a tool used by Keynesians. And tax increases, something that traditional Keynesians are against in bad times. We always hear about austerity in Great Britain and across Europe, and everybody talks about the spending cuts, but we never hear about the tax increases. And when you start talking about that, talk about the fact that they cut spending, slash spending at the same time they hiked taxes, it really was a formula made to fail.
Well, spending cuts and tax increases have more or less the same effect. They both take money out of the economy. They both slow the economy. And yes, they create this idea of austerity. But it's a balancing problem. You need, on the one hand, to deal with, as you well know, budget deficits and debt. And on the other hand, you need to keep growth going. Here's an interesting thing I saw over the weekend, just briefly. The recession in Greece, which is actually depression, if you line it up against the U.S. Great Depression in 1929, it looks a lot alike in terms of how much unemployment there is, how much the economy is contracted. Greece is having our Great Depression of the late 1920s.
Wow.
All right, moving on to Washington now.
Setting.
Yes, a nicer setting. President Obama's renewed push for a grand bargain may be showing some early signs of paying off, at least with one top Republican. Senator Bob Corker of Tennessee says he could envision raising tax revenue if Democrats embrace big changes to Medicare and Social Security. Corker's position on Sunday puts him at odds with other members of his party, including House Speaker John Boehner, who's ruling out the prospect of any new taxes.
I think there, by the way, is a chance on a deal. I know the president is saying the right things, and we have an opportunity over the next 4 to 5 months. I think Republicans, if they saw true entitlement reform, would be glad to look at tax reform that generates additional revenues. And that doesn't mean increasing rates. That means closing loopholes. It also means arranging our tax system so that we have economic growth.
I don't know whether we can come to a big agreement. If we do, it'll be between the two parties on Capitol Hill. The president got his tax hikes on January the 1st. The talk about raising revenue is over. It's time to deal with the spending problem.
And, of course, the Speaker's going to say that.
Yeah.
What the Speaker has to say is the leader of the Republican House. But this weekend confirmed what I'd said last week. When a lot of people were saying, oh, no deal's in the works. They're moving closer together. The key point out of the John Boehner interview was he was asked whether he could trust the president. And his answer was, Mark, absolutely.
Yes. And I think it's close to true. Enough.
It's close to true that he can absolutely trust the president?
There's enough trust, I think, between the parties right now that this can happen. It's really about sequencing. We all could describe the deal pretty clearly. in most of its outlines. It's how you sequence in what the so-called regular order that the Speaker and others are looking for, and that the White House sort of favors to some extent, which is to make this a congressional process, and then get the Senate to agree on something, and then, if I may speak indelicately, jam the House, and basically say to the House, this is the deal.
Ron Fournier, you've been doing some great reporting on this issue over the past couple of months, and where are you right now from everything you've seen up close? The White House, of course, responded strongly to your article suggesting that this was all just sort of a charm offensive. The House now is saying, well, there are only certain things we can do. But behind the scenes, are you starting to hear a little bit more movement?
Yeah, I'm like Mark. I'm getting a little bit optimistic that maybe both sides might have the courage and the foresight to actually step up and lead. I don't believe Speaker Boehner when he says no more tax cuts. I'm with you. I think that's positioning. I think he's got to do that right now. I don't believe liberal Democrats when they say we're not going to touch entitlements. They've got to realize that if they don't attack entitlements in a real serious way, it squeezes out all of their priorities for the next several generations. So I think at the end of the day, I just got to hope that both sides use this next couple months to take care of their bases and they step up and get it done.
All right, we'll see.
All right, let's move on.